Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with special guest Dean McMurray. Today is Wednesday, and this is your daily dose of happy, and we are so happy you decided to join us today. And Dean, you heard the hesitation there. I'm trying out a new intro, and I just flubbed it. And we were talking before the show about how, when you flub it, the flubs are almost as good as the real thing, So we're going to go with that was almost as good as the real thing.
Right. Well, thanks for having me back, Walt. It's really an honor not only to be asked, but be back on your show. And I'm loving the new intro.
Well, I'm doing the new intro because, as I told you before the show, and listeners know about this, we are within a few weeks of getting our show onto local cable access television.
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
The person who is the station manager, I gave her a sample show. One of the shows that I did with Cindy Chavez, who is, by the way, people who are wondering, she's out sick today, not feeling well, so that's why Dean is sitting in. But we did this introductory version for the cable channel, and the person who runs the station got back to me and said, "Yeah, let's see if we can work something out." By the way, are your shows? Do they have to be on the air at a certain time? I asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, because you always date it at the top." And it hadn't occurred to me that could be an issue, because if they're running the shows on a different date, that could be rather confusing. So after years and years of doing the other intro, I think it's time I switch the intro up. So
switch it up, putting some new energy coming in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a little time because I had it written out and I still flubbed it. So it's going to take
That's
some
all
practice.
right. That's all right. We were talking too before we went live about, I think I was just asking you the curiosity of how long you've been doing the show and kind of the beginnings of things, right?
Right.
And to get through, but what we perceive, what it needs to be like constructed in our mind, and then the reality of what it actually shows up to be like. So we talk about the realism. I think you brought up the analogy of, reality TV is still scripted at some level. And yeah, but stuff like this is just so real and raw. And where you can't script out. I mean, it's like
no self-respecting producer would ever script it out this way anyway. I mean, let's be honest about it.
Well, you're losing such great content if you do, I believe, and really, I think that you would get away from the true nature of things if you start doing that, because the energy is just, I call it just kind of wonky, right? It's off.
I agree.
You feel it inauthentic. Yep. It's like, boy, they sound like a robot. They're just really in a box instead of, hey, it was a really fun. They were able to do this, and it just kind of gets boring, right?
I kind of thought from the beginning, because I asked myself 8 years ago when I first started doing the show, how do I want this show to go? And at first it was me and Louise doing it together, and she kind of lost interest after a couple episodes. And then a few months later, my brother and sister-in-law came on, and my sister-in-law actually did some shows with me for a while. And then she had other things she needed to do. And then my friend Joel Elston, I was telling you about him, he came on and did it for quite a few years with me. But during all that time of just kind of feeling out how it's all going to go, I kept asking myself, how do I want this show to be? What do I want it to be like? Right. And one of the first answers I came to, it took me about 2 years to get there, but it was, I want it to be a happy show. I want it to be a show that feels good. And that's where Your Daily Dose of Happy ultimately came from.
Nice.
And then the other thing that I really wanted, I wanted it to be like, my co-host and I were sitting at a table in a restaurant chatting, and listeners got to listen in over our shoulders. I wanted to have that kind of feel, but without the clanking sounds of the silverware in the
kitchen. Right. And the mouthfuls of whatever you're eating.
Exactly.
How many of those conversations have we actually all overheard, like somebody talking about their recent colonoscopy or something?
Well, yeah.
Next door. It's
you can't rule those out here, I'm saying, but.
Oh, yeah. But
mostly, no, we focus on the Daily Dose of Happy. We focus on keeping it light and fun. I love doing the shows on Thursdays and yesterday also because Dan and Alex, who do the Thursday show with me, sat in on the Tuesday show because David Strickle, who does the Tuesday show, couldn't do that show. And when I do a show with Dan and Alex, I basically, it's kind of like what I told you before the show, only a little bit different. It's like with Joel, I would say one thing and he'd be gone for 20 minutes talking about it. With Dan and Alex, it's a funny thing. I'll bring up a topic. We'll kill the topic in about 20 seconds. And then it's just the Dan and Alex show going crazy with every single funny thing they can think of to say. and me trying to keep up, you know?
Right, right.
So,
well, you know, everything that I've heard you talk about, Walt, is really about creating a community, right? So in an environment, a network of not only your great guests and co-hosts, but really your listeners out there, and creating an
totally.
You know, that geodescent pattern of that connection.
Yeah.
And I just love that. You're creating a community.
I mean, we get so much email and messages through the LOA Today app. That was a big breakthrough, getting that app out there.
I bet.
And yeah, the feedback we get. I mean, first of all, we get people sending in questions. By the way, speaking of which, I should do a little promo. You know, for those of you who have the LOA Today app, thank you for downloading and using it. And use the app to send your questions in, because you can send a question to any of my co-hosts and we'll address it on the next show that they're on. But also make sure you're sharing the app with others so that they're able to do the same thing. And it actually makes it pretty easy to contact us. But Dean, the contacts that we get, I mean, every once in a while there's somebody you can't satisfy, but for the most part, first of all, we have fabulous listeners, people who are advanced conscious creators. And I love that fact.
That's awesome.
I think a lot of them are better at it than I am, to be perfectly blunt. And the messages they write of support and appreciation are just off the scale.
Isn't
I mean,
that
how often do we
beautiful?
talk about the importance of gratitude and appreciating?
Right.
Our listeners are the most appreciative listeners I have ever heard of in my life. So yeah, we have a fabulous community, and that's as much a testament to them as it is to me and my team.
Well, you know, what was interesting is that one of the things that the overwhelming piece that made me reach out and connect with you, Walt, is the overall vibe of your show. You know, although I'm a newcomer, you know, obviously.
You're the newbie.
Yeah, I'm the newbie. But, you know, I really feel into, obviously, the energy piece of shows, but I just felt it. It had the good vibe, right? The happy vibe. It just, and I was like, this feels good. And, I'm glad to hear that the response is great, because when you're putting out this is kind of like the karmic energy, right? When you're putting out good vibes, good things will come back, and you're going to connect to great people, and they're going to be attracted to the same. So, it's no wonder that you got great folks when you're putting out great vibes. Of course, there's always going to be ones and twos, but you know, that don't. Yeah, but
you can't satisfy everybody. There's no way.
No, you can't, and that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Everybody needs love. So.
But you were asking about when I went to 5 days a week. You asked me before the show, why did I do that? And it was because I just loved it so much. I couldn't get enough of it once a week. So at that time, that was let's see, that was November of 2016, 2017. I can't remember which year. But at that point, I said, okay, well, I need a lot more co-hosts because Joel can't do it with me 5 days a week. So I need somebody else. And so it was a Sunday, and I remember thinking, well, I'll just go find some life coaches. Life coaches are usually into this stuff, you know. So I'll find some life coaches. And I found like a half dozen of them and sent them emails. And you know what? 3 of them wrote back saying, you know what's happening today? I was thinking I should really get into doing a podcast, and your email came through. And all 3 of them became co-hosts.
That's so
Tom
awesome.
Wells and Wendy Dillard. And it was just an amazing thing. Cindy's still with me after all these years.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like another proof of law of attraction really does work.
Right. It does. It truly does. And a lot of people don't get that. But I'm so curious, Walt, like, did you have a career in radio or anything before you started podcasting? Or is it something that you're like, you know, I want to really express this with everybody?
I mean, when I was in college, I did college radio, which is, you know, this was back in the late 1970s. And anyone who was in school at that point knows that college radio at that point was mainly get out an album, play it, and then say a minute of things and then put another album on. So there wasn't a whole lot of mic work, but I did enjoy the part that I did.
Sure.
And, you know, sometimes I do mixes and so forth so I could say more. just to have more airtime, right?
Sure.
But no, I never pursued a career in radio. I think because I just heard you never got any good money that way, and I figured, well, I've got to be able to earn a living, But yeah, I've had that thought. I've wondered to myself, what would have happened if I had gone down that path? And I don't know. But I did have a little bit of experience, and it did tell me. Well, first of all, I got good input on my voice. People were telling me, okay, you got a good radio voice. I said, oh, okay, good. All right, well, that's a good start. Now, if I had...
Did you say, what are you saying about my face? No. You have a great voice for radio. What are you saying about my face?
Well, the thing about radio is they don't care about your face.
Right, yeah.
It's like
right, they don't. They're
voice.
Listening to your voice, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. The old adage of or I have a face for radio.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Radio is just, it's its own animal, right? So all the, it's kind of an interesting genre because a lot of people in the podcasting world are like you're streaming live now. As far as blunders and bleeps and whatever, there's not a lot of really second thoughts to it, but in live radio, it's always worried about, dead air, or, hey, in the podcast world, it's like, whatever. It's like, it's,
well, I've always been cognizant of that. I've been aware of it. I don't want,
but,
I don't want to have the dead space. And
right.
It actually helped me to develop as a conscious creator. Because there are times where you had a topic in mind. Sometimes we don't. Today we just start kind of winging it. But there are times where you have a topic in mind, and then the topic is done after 10 minutes. And okay, now what do I do?
Now what do you do? Right.
And sometimes I'm blessed with a co-host like Joel who I could say one thing and he's done for the next 20 minutes, and I might be able to get something in edgewise. But that's not always the case with everybody. So sometimes you're going to get that moment where, okay, what comes next? And I don't remember exactly what the impetus was behind it, but at one point, talking to one of my co-hosts after a podcast episode, I think it was Wendy, she was suggesting to me, just use it as an opportunity to connect within and see what comes out. And I have never been one who's been really great at getting verbal communication or, word communication going on. I could occasionally get an image. I can occasionally get a feeling, but not much more than that. So that was kind of terrifying, to be perfectly honest. But I decided to try it. And the way I ended up doing it was, if it came to a point where I knew I didn't have anything to say.
Right.
I would come out with, I had like 2 or 3 phrases I would use. Well, that makes me think of, or, what you say there kind of leads me to think about something else, and it is, and in the course of saying those words, then I just open my mouth and see if anything comes out. And the astonishing thing was, more often than not, something came out.
There you go.
And it, as it was coming out, it felt to me hesitant and like, I have no idea where this is going, and am I using complete sentences? And then I'd listen to myself afterward and I'd say, that actually made sense. How did I do that?
Feel like you're talking in circles and rambling, yeah?
And I actually have gotten better at it. So I kind of think maybe it's my way to learn how to do that interconnection thing. To have
sometimes doing what could be considered conscious channeling.
In a sense, yeah.
Have you ever done a speech or something and been up there and said, when you get done, you're like, I don't even know what I just said. And everybody is like, oh my God, that was so great. And it's like, really? Okay, thanks. And I don't know, just nod and just bye-bye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't had a total blank on a speech, but I have given talks where I had it pretty well mapped out, and I would get to the middle of the talk and I couldn't remember what came next.
Sure.
So I think I actually had practice doing this channeling thing or whatever it is earlier on, but they never complained, and they always thought it was a really great speech. And I'm thinking, why am I not getting paid to do this?
Right. I remember one time I was doing a gallery at a psychic gallery, at a casino, and I was so nervous. It was my biggest event.
I gotta interrupt you there. A psychic gallery at a casino.
Yeah, so you think about
I mean, if you're playing like poker or blackjack, I would think the other players are freaking out over the idea that there's a psychic at the table.
Well, this was actually, I'll preface it by saying it was part of a paranormal convention.
Oh, okay.
And I was the featured medium to give a mediumship gallery. So you think of a public gathering, about 400 or 500 folks, and then you get up there and, give evidential proof that,
so you weren't actually at the tables. And
I
so
wasn't hit me again, and then it's like, your grandma's here. It's like, it was, it's like, she wants you to bet on what, she wants you to bet on red 14.
Yeah, right.
It's like a gambling. Maybe we can make that a thing. I don't know. Laws.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Somebody's hey, put me down for the lotto. So,
exactly.
yeah.
You actually get a stream of people following you over to the roulette table, and whatever you bet, they bet the same thing.
They'd be like, I wonder how much money. Keep tabs on him. See how much money he loses or wins. That's why I don't do the gambling part. So I'm not all that great at it. So
it's funny though. I had a co-host fairly early on. He was about my fourth one, I think it was. His name was David Bartke. He was only with me for a few months, but he was first of all, he was very he had a very strict approach to law of attraction. He always presented it the same way. He always addressed the same kinds of topics, which is probably why he was only here for 3 or 4 months. But he also was really good at applying it in his life. And he could do it in the casino as well. Now, his thing was to go play the machines, which any, mathematician will tell you is your worst thing to do, because the odds are so heavily against you.
Right.
He would win almost every time. And
wow.
He would do it using intuition and conscious creation.
Sure.
Just over and over again. One of the best stories he told me, I don't know these machines, but apparently one of the things that can happen is you can get free spins, on a one-arm bandit spins.
Sure.
These are electronic machines, but it's the same concept.
Right.
And he was in a groove, and he was actually making money, and then he won 500 free spins.
Holy
and he just sat
cow.
there pushing the button, free spin, and money's coming out and coming out and coming out.
Jeez, I need to hang out with that guy.
I mean, David was amazing. He was truly an amazing creator.
That is so awesome.
He also had a really great story about how he had moved to Manhattan and he saw what it's like to try to get an apartment there. If you know anything about New York City, rents in New York are horrific and very difficult to get. And what you can get for the money is usually pretty meager. And he came from a family that, had pretty nice places, and he didn't want to just kind of settle for that. So he said, I'm going to attract something better. I'm going to attract a really nice apartment. It's going to be in New York. It's going to be on Central Park West, right near the gate to Central Park, and it's going to be at a rent that I can afford. And what he could afford wasn't a lot. But somehow it was all going to come together. And he was so confident about it. He believed in it so completely, it actually did happen. And the way it happened was, it was one of those serendipitous, one synchronicity after another.
Isn't that so cool?
And it all just kind of fell into place perfectly, exactly the way he dreamed it. And he was so good at that stuff.
That stuff just blows me away. I mean, obviously it's really cool when it happens to you, but I love it when it happens to anybody.
Oh yeah.
And you hear about it. But yeah, it's so crazy. And a lot of people don't get it. And it's interesting because I had a similar situation, going back about 10 years, about 9-10 years, when shortly after my spiritual awakening, right? On that Friday show, I shared about my journey or a little bit about it. But the thing that I didn't talk about was when I retired and I was starting to do this full time, being a psychic medium. There's a period when you get out of the military that they stop your because I was being, retired. So they were going to pay me, per month. But there's about a month that you don't get paid.
Oh, okay.
Because the military Uncle Sam wants to make sure you don't have any debts to the government. And so there's a month gap, and then
holding on to it.
Pay all that.
Yeah.
Well, about the time that I retired and they stopped my pay, the government at that time was, we were in they were in a shutdown basically. And they stopped all military and government funding for a short period of time. Oh, by the way, my wife at the time, had to leave work because of health reasons.
Oh God.
And so there was no money coming in, and we had a couple little kids. And so I was freaking out, and I was like, do I need to run down and get a job? I don't care, flipping burgers. Do I need,
something just to get through.
Something to get by, is until we get going, what do we need to do? And we both clearly, my wife does energy work as well, got very clearly, that we were not to do that. Okay. And we were like, kind of looking at the universe going, in the bank account, like, but clearly it was like, don't worry, it's all going to come in. And it was so crazy, Walt, because you talk about manifesting stuff. For example, during that period, there was a time, where, a friend of ours said, hey, do you mind if I come over and use your printer to print off a job resume? And I said, well, that's not a problem. However, we're out of ink. Couldn't afford ink, to be quite honest.
Sure.
And he showed up, actually late, and he goes, it was so weird. He was like kind of looking around like he didn't know what the hell he was doing there at our house. And he goes, I'm going to go home, but here's like, I don't know if he was in a trance or what, but he was like, I don't need to use it. But just keep the ink. Like, the ink manifested itself. Payment, like we overpaid in insurance or something, and checks would come in from, like insurance or other things that evidently we overpaid. Mm-hmm. And it was just so crazy. And it was like, wow, we just completely amazed. And of course, now I will preface this by saying that we just didn't sit there and just wish everything. We had to take active steps into doing things. We had to reach out to, hey, let's start thinking of ideas and, maybe events or whatever, but start thinking in a business mindset. But at the same time, the universe was kind of walking towards us as we were walking towards, and I think that's one of the things that people, a misconception, that you can just sit and, in a sense, just sit with your hand out and expect it to be delivered without any action on your part.
Well, it's certainly a hell of a lot easier with the action piece. I think it actually is possible, but you got to have a level of certainty that far exceeds what most people can muster in order to have it just kind of appear. That's really pushing it for most people. Because, I mean, if you could really believe that, yeah, sure, it could happen. Sure, I don't know anyone who can do that.
Right.
I don't know who has that level of belief. I certainly don't. I mean, my level is a lot better than it used to be, but, I mean, I just know going into it, no, I'm not even going to try to do that. I'm going to do an action step of some kind inspired by what it is I'm trying to do. Not going to just kind of sit there and wait, because I could be waiting a long time knowing me.
Well, the thing is, though, is what I found personally is I'm able to get to those visions or those goals a lot quicker if I take actionable steps, or if I at least take a few steps through the doorway. And it could be in a completely different scope or direction, but at least the universe knows that I'm moving forward instead of, at least for me personally. Now, some other people would be like, Dean, stuff was showing up.
And that does happen. I know.
Yes, it does.
I know people it happens with. Dan Mangan is a great example of that. But the beauty, and I think this is kind of what gets overlooked with what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. The beauty of taking the action steps is that when you're taking action steps, unless you're really tripping yourself up, you're in a good vibe. Yeah. Because you're doing this because you really want this thing to happen. Right. You want to be a part of it, and you don't necessarily know what to do. You don't necessarily know how it's going to play out. You just know you have to take some kind of a step, and the universe will just kind of guide you, and you just kind of follow the signs, so to speak. But just doing that feels a little bit better than what it felt before you did it. And that makes a difference. Makes a huge difference.
Oh, it does. It does. One of my favorite books, when talking about law of attraction, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon
Hill. Yeah.
Oh, love it. I love in the part of the book where he talks about back before he wrote the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to get to New York
Mm-hmm.
to pitch the idea of the book. And
Right.
it was during the Depression and he didn't have a penny to his name.
Right.
And he walked around that schoolhouse about a bazillion times to try to figure out what he's going to do. And then finally it just, hey, you need to go ask your brother-in-law for the money and a car, whatever, and get there. And then, hey, don't get the cheap room. Treat yourself. Get a good room because then you're going to project yourself better.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things that he did based off his intuition or what he was getting from the universe, right? Yeah. And by the time he left New York, he had the deal. He had the money to pay. However, I think he was there, over a week or whatever, but he had all this money and he got it back tenfold. And
in fact, if I remember correctly, that's what led to the trip to Pittsburgh where he met with Carnegie.
Right. It was all serendipitous. One door opened the other and I was completely blown away. And that's still remains one of my top favorite books about law of attraction, listening to your intuition, because here he was back in an era that wasn't really accepted widely, right? That was, they're very quiet. And here he's doing this and he's listening. And
that was actually my frustration with the book, believe it or not. The fact that he was living in that period of time where he really couldn't be direct. So he was so indirect that I didn't understand what he was talking about half the time.
Oh,
there were times he would say, if you understand this, you know what I'm saying here. And I'd say, I don't understand. What the hell are you saying? I don't get it.
You don't get it till you get it.
Literally for years, I was just frustrated with Think and Grow Rich because I felt cheated. Just tell me what it is, Napoleon. Come on. But
sure.
He lived in a time where if he had done that, I think his publishers were right about that.
Right.
If he had been more specific and more direct about it, he probably would have been ridden out of town on a rail at that point in time.
Right. Well, and think back to it, that book, now correct me if I'm wrong, the book was not published, or the full book was not published until after his passing. There was something that wasn't published until, I don't
know that part.
Well, there was something that I think it was the full manuscript or something, but it was pretty controversial for the time anyways. And it made a huge impact into a lot of people's lives. But at the same time, it was he was ahead of his time.
No doubt about it. There were other people who were contemporaries of his. Mm-hmm. Florence Scovel Shinn comes to mind. She actually wrote a few years before he did. And Wallace Wattles, of course, who was the inspiration for The Secret and a few others. But it was pretty rare. And if you were in that camp, the concept of what they call New Thought started in the late 19th century. But it was on the same level as Ouija boards. It was not respected at all. It was often considered to be the devil's work. It was, it had a very bad rep. So it's almost amazing it actually caught on at all, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too, because that goes into his other book. I think it was called Outwitting the Devil.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I never read it.
Yeah. So, where basically Napoleon Hill, if the thought of, basically it goes with the thought that we have within us, basically, the devil in a sense, if you think of it that way. And the devil being anything that keeps us in a state of accomplishing what we want through, hypnotic rhythm, I think he uses the term, but basically procrastination. Mm-hmm. And basically what those things are, like money, sex, booze, all these different things that were of the time. Now, you can add social media and other things, electronics. But anything you devote your time to keep yourself from doing something that you truly should be doing to live your greatest potential, right? Or what you want to do.
It just occurred to me there's somebody else, too, from that same era who found a way to get the message out without offending the powers that be, and that's Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard did his teaching from the 1930s through the 1960s, so he was right in the midst of all that in the early part of his career. And he basically framed it in terms of Christianity and said, well, this is based on the Bible. It's just what you've been taught in the Bible is inaccurate. Here's what the Bible really means. And so he basically, took their stuff and turned it into this stuff.
Right.
And got
now
away
I
with
can
it.
only
Because he actually gave his talks in a chapel that was controlled by the Catholic Church in New York City.
Oh, wow.
I mean, just like, wow.
Right.
So that was clever work right there.
Right.
That was really clever.
But could you imagine being a fly in the wall, like rocking just the bolt there, saying like, this is all in the Bible, but it's all been done wrong. It's like, what are you saying? And it's like, boy, that's a huge organization especially back then where things were more staunch, right? It's less open-mindedness, I think is so fascinating.
It's truly amazing. And literally, I mean, he turned all of basic Christian teaching on its ear. I mean, for him, God and Jesus were the equivalent of consciousness.
Wow.
And he even would say that at times, X equals Y. They are the same thing, Right. And Cindy Chavez and I actually did most of his books page by page, discussing the chapters and so forth. And we developed what we call the Neville decoder ring, which is where you take all of this metaphors and you say, okay, this is what he really means when he says that. This is what he's really talking about, because otherwise you can get lost really quick.
Sure.
And I'm sure that was by design because of the restraints that he was working within. But my God, the things that he was teaching were sacrilege. They were heresy.
Right?
I mean, they really were. If
actually,
some top-level bishop got a hold of it.
Well, that's why I was like really surprised when you said he was actually talking about this stuff in like churches.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah, it was a particular chapel that he gave his talks in particular. I mean, he would travel the country too. And there were some great stories that came out of that.
Those guys were ahead of their time, I tell you.
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really were.
That's so awesome. That's so cool.
And it's also cool. I mean, I mentioned Florence Scovel Shinn. I'm glad that there's at least one woman in there.
Right.
And she was way ahead of her time. I don't know if you've read her stuff, but she was she was one of the early ones. She was earlier than both Neville and Napoleon. Yeah.
That's really, very cool. And I'm sure there's more. We just haven't heard of them, right?
I know of a famous one.
Okay.
The author of the Sherlock Holmes stories, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Really?
He was into this stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I never saw anything that said anything similar to law of attraction per se.
Sure.
But he was very much into alternative spiritualism and so forth in a big, big way. Yeah.
Really? That's fascinating.
You never hear that side of him.
No, you don't. You don't. Now almost makes me want to go back and open up like an old Sherlock Holmes or something, see if there's any smatterings of it in his work. It's like I'm trying to think.
Little bits. I mean, I know the stories really well. There's like 56 stories, I think it is. And I know them all pretty well. And every once in a while, there's like a little bit in there, but he was really, really careful not to insert it. He wanted to just tell the stories in the Strand magazine so that the readers would keep buying the stories through the magazine every week.
Right.
Which is understandable.
Didn't want to commit artist suicide per se.
Exactly.
By falling on that sword. So
it gave new meaning to the phrase politically correct.
Well,
or perhaps old meaning, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's so crazy, and I think we just keep on using the term like ahead of their time, and it just and it's so interesting, like, because people even now, they use that term like for folks, you're ahead of your time. It's like, well, when the hell is the right time, right?
Yes, right.
There was people before me doing this. There's people now. It's like, really? It's like, let's get with the program. So,
well, especially in light of what we know about the nature of time at this point in the development of, spiritualism and energy understanding and interconnection and so forth,
right?
Because we've been now able to tie it into the theories of quantum physics, and quantum physics basically teaches us how warped time really is, and ultimately how it has little or no meaning. And so now we actually have an understanding that says, well, time is just an illusion. and reality is divinely indifferent to this whole concept of time. So that's how it is that you can have these synchronicities that appear at the most wacky times because there is no time. It's just an illusion.
It's just a free-for-all. It's like, so is it a free-for-all? Do you get
Yeah.
It's like, how do, and isn't it interesting when somebody says that, Walt, like there is no time. So then I'll call the 3D mind, right?
Okay.
The trying to conceptualize that, put it in terms that we can understand, like almost saying, okay, so is there mile markers? It's like, no, there's none of that. It just exists. It's not yesterday. It's not today or tomorrow. It just is. It's like, what? It's like, it's always, it just exists.
But we are starting to get, I guess you could call them mileage markers in a sense.
Sure.
Through science.
Yeah.
I mean, science for quite some time has been able to replicate the experiment where you have two different controlled environments and you have event A happen in the first laboratory, so to speak, and it occurs simultaneously at the second laboratory, 150 miles away. And they've been able to reproduce that quite a bit. But recently, they were able to reproduce it galactically. They were able to do it through a nearby star system. And I don't remember exactly how they were able to do it, but they were able to do something here and then notice that it was actually coming through there as well. And I don't quite understand how that works because it takes light X amount of years for it to come here, light years. So I don't quite get how they measure that. But they were able to prove it to the satisfaction of scientists that you could actually do simultaneity.
That is so cool.
Whoa.
Right?
So you want some evidence that there is no time? I think there's some evidence right there.
Well, the cool thing is as science catches up, starting to prove, I guess, on the logical aspect, just like you shared, things such as that, as far as, the perception of time and other things, frequency and matter and all this great stuff that has been talked about for decades. And now it's just saying, here's quantifiable facts and figures, to show you that really is the case. It's not just some mumbo jumbo.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Right.
There's two lines from an old movie that we all know, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And the two lines in the movie, I think, really summarize what we're talking about. This is where they're on the top of that flat mountain. I can't remember what it's called.
Devil's Tower, right?
The Devil's Tower, yeah.
Yep.
And the ships are starting to come in. I think one of them's actually landed. And these two scientists are there. And one of them says to the other, Einstein was right. And the other one says, Einstein was probably one of them.
Right?
That pretty much summarizes it, I think.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's an understatement there for sure.
So let's get back to what we were talking about a little bit on Friday, because you had the experience of bringing in your psychic abilities and combining them with Rita's and with Linda's. It was quite the psychic session. I was loving the way you guys were kind of tag teaming.
Oh, I had so much fun. Those ladies are so much fun. Such great energy.
Oh, yeah.
Just...
Linda and Rita are fabulous.
Yes. Awesome.
But let's go. What I'm trying to kind of segue into is the psychic thing that you got going, that you discovered about 3 years before you left the military.
Yeah.
And you kind of outlined, you were going through, well, okay, what am I going to do with this thing? I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And you ultimately came to decisions about that. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that part of the story. What happened after you decided what you were going to do?
Oh, man. It was like I fell down the rabbit hole, right? Somebody came out, little green gremlin came out and beat me with a bat. No, that's what it feels like sometimes. No. After I really embraced Walt, I was like, I guess I am a medium, and, my mission is really what it's always been, because that's the reason that I've joined the military, is to not only be a part of something bigger than myself, but to really help other people. That's really what it's all about. And at least for me. And so I was like, that's my new mission statement. And, if I can help just one individual, it'll make it all worth it. And, so I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? And so I started dipping my toes, so to speak, into the professional aspect of being a psychic medium. And, I took a class in mediumship because I had to understand, because in the early days, my abilities were on again, off again, meaning sometimes it was like drinking from a fire hydrant, quite literally, with all the information. I couldn't speak fast enough. I was getting so much. And then it was like, boom, it was dried up. And I was like, I was frustrated. And so
it was an on-off switch, and you didn't know where the on-off switch was.
Right. And I didn't know if there was. Is it me? And so I was like, I need to learn more about this. I need to, set some boundaries around everything and learn the ins and outs. And so I found an ethical teacher. I did my research, and it was like the universe really presented. It was cool. It was universe really just said, here you go. It was a guy. There's a lot of great teachers out there, but in this instance, it was a guy, and said, here you go. And so I took a class in mediumship, and then really after that, I took a year and just tried to figure, practice my craft, if you will. And I didn't charge anything.
Just trying it out, just seeing if you could do it.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing with this. And then I was like, and of course my wife, it was interesting as I started getting closer. We're right before retirement, and my wife goes, when are you going to start charging? And I remember this still very vividly. I got mad at her because I still felt that I was very much, in a sense, the apprentice. I felt like, how am I going to, I used the analogy of a plumber. I said, how am I going to charge like a plumber when I'm still the apprentice? And, and she was like, well, it's all about energy, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, but I'm still getting the feedback from the clients as far as my learning. That's my energy exchange. And once I got over the aspect of asking for money, because I had a big personal hang up with that,
sure,
about asking for a price. It was funny because people just before I even asked, people started offering me money.
Right.
Here's, and I was like, and it was so crazy. I look back at it and I laugh at myself because people were literally, a couple friends threw money at me, said, here, take your damn money. Don't give me anything. And I was like, going, no, I'm not doing this for money. This is free. And they were like, would you take them? Almost getting in an argument. And I was like, the universe is going, what, you idiot? Would you be open to receive? You're denying them the ability to give. And
look, it's one thing to wake up, but you got to wake up. Come on.
Right. And so when I got over myself, quite honestly, and the fact of you're providing a service and they are wanting to pay, then it was like I came up with a amount and started charging. And then so I started doing it in a business.
By the way, one of our regular listeners is putting stuff in the live stream. He says, "I'm loving this information. It's helping me in the time that I'm in," and that's because he provides one-to-one personal service.
Oh yeah,
helping with people with healing. So he's eating this up.
Oh, awesome. Well, I trust that the universe is leading us in the right direction with conversation, right? But what I have found personally, in looking back, this is hindsight. When any time that I had a conflict with myself or issues with myself about charging money for my service or product or whatever, or raising my rates, it's all what I found personally. It's more about finding value with me.
Yes.
It was my value. It wasn't about Dean's reading, what Johnny Q will pay for a reading. It was what Dean McMurray believes Dean McMurray's worth. Because that you're damn right, a reading with Dean McMurray is worth XYZ, then I had zero problems telling a client that my readings cost. And when I first started seeing clients, actually, we're in my office now, there's But when they used to come to my home for readings, I used to dance around the part when it came to money because it was always awkward. Do you ask him in the front? Do you ask him in, do I feel needy asking, okay, it's so much money for whatever, and it's like, it's almost like the universe saying, get over it. If you go and buy donuts or hire an electrician, they will send you a bill or you got to pay right then.
Yeah.
And there's no dancing around it. There's the price.
That's right.
So whether you've already come to the realization that maybe you're exchanging services or products for doing what you're getting, and you can do the barter system. I've done that for great friends that are masseuses, and they're like, hey,
there you go.
And I was like, hell yeah, I'm all about
Sure.
massage. But the thing is that regardless of what you agree to, the biggest thing at the end of the day, as long as it's an equal energy exchange. And when it came to, again, I will reiterate, when I had issues when it came to price or raising my price, it all boiled down to me. It had nothing to do about anybody else. It really had nothing to do about my readings. It was all about what I felt I was worth. And when I was able to take the quintessential Sharpie marker and a dry erase and rewrite how much above that price above our heads, how much we feel that we're worth, then guess what? Sky's the limit. And that's when I really was able to start manifesting, because I pulled the restraints off of what I believed in my reptilian brain of what I'm worth. And once you start increasing your worth, your product, your services become more sought after. They'll become more, they'll become richer in a sense. I'm not talking money richer, but talking about it has a deeper depth to it. One of the cool things I've noticed over the years, I was thinking like, hey, I'll discount. I've done this before, thinking, I'll give everybody a break and I'll discount something like a reading, right? I think one time it was a half-hour reading, and I discounted, and it was this stupid discount. I mean, when I say stupid, it was really low, and I thought I was trying to be generous, and because I knew things were tight for folks, and I thought it's my way of giving.
Yep.
And I thought, you know what? This is a great opportunity for folks that want to get my services. And guess what? I maybe had one reading out of that. Guess why? Because they didn't see value in something that was steeply discounted.
Yeah.
Ooh, must not be worth it if he's really discounted. Or it seems needy. And even though I use the verbiage, hey, I know that there's people out there struggling and everything, saying, hey, I'm trying to help folks out. But if they don't see value in it, they're not going to get it, even if they're struggling. And not saying that, you go outside their, how do I want to say, financial threshold, but at the same, and you got to determine your price for you. But at the same time is what I have found personally is if I drop my rates way too much trying to help folks out, they don't see value in it, and I won't see a return in that. And so in reality, it's just the opposite. I help less people because less people are signing up for the services, classes, or whatever. So I pick the middle of the road and then saying, okay, well, it's discounted some, but still kind of up there, or maybe it's average, whatever the case. And then you'll see it, right? And so that was one of the big things that was eye-opening to me. It was like, really? You're getting this much for this, I'm thinking on the, but yeah, they're like,
there's a lot
no.
of truth to that. There really is.
It's crazy. And, another thing I'll share that I struggled with in the beginning, was when I started going to business and I was charging money and everything was going fine. But then comes the time in everybody's business. It's like, I've been doing this for maybe a few years or whatever the case is, and you start getting known, you're starting to develop your brand or your business. And then comes the time for a price change. And because you're trying to provide more, there's a lot of overhead and other things, and there's nothing wrong with getting paid for what you're doing. And when you start meeting or exceeding the price that your mentors or your teachers charge, and again, it goes back to what you feel that you're worth. They're saying, how can I be charging this? I've only been in business
right
3, 5, whatever, however long, 5 months. I don't care. It's up, and again, it was like the universe, like, God, would you get over yourself? Like, somebody's got to go, oh my God, he's back at it again. Would you give me the bottle? It's like, oh my God. But the thing is really it was, almost those steps predominantly steps. But I would share, I think the last time, it's been a number of years since I did a big price adjustment. And, one of the things, and it was a pretty substantial jump in charging. And the thing that I would share is I knew that I would lose when I did it. I made a real conscious decision. Mm-hmm. And I knew that by doing it, I would lose some customers. Sure. I knew it. And I was like, and I don't want to, leave anybody out. I want to be able to serve in any capacity. But the universe was like, Dean, you can't serve everybody. This is a big world. There's so many people for everybody else.
Well, plus there isn't all that much hours in the day. I mean, you're limited in terms of what you can fit. It's one of you. That's
there's one, and I got a family, and there's other stuff going on besides, just doing mediumship stuff too, right? And there's so many other facets that I do. And so the thing that I would share is like, okay, well, so when I made the jump, it was really interesting because it brings you into a whole different paradigm. Mm-hmm. And it's like, all right, as long as you're comfortable with that and you can hold the energy of that energy exchange, then, that's something. But, I'm still a big believer in giving back when you can. Whatever that is. So whether it's, through a conversation, whether it's introductions or just free advice or, whatever that is, but I'm still a big believer in giving back where and when you can. And it's not always financial, but of course I'm always giving tons of readings away to fundraisers and galas and and all
That's
that.
Just part of the marketing, really.
Well, sure, and it's also there's a marketing aspect to that too. But then also I put it in that genre, that niche of, hey, this is also my way of giving back. Sure, So I was saying, that way I'm donating my time and talents to raise some money for a great cause, and that way then. Somebody gets a reading. So
absolutely.
Always, So
it's a good question, a good topic. For me personally, Jeffrey, by the way, was expressing his appreciation for what you were talking about. And for my own situation, I mean, I do this show just because I love it. I've never made money off of it. I want to get to the point where I can. Sure. And I've had lots of people suggesting things. Well, what you really should do is this, do some merchandising, or do have people, do like the public TV and ask people to become donors, or you can also charge the people who are coming on to reach your audience and all that. Yeah. And none of it resonated with me. None of it resonated. What kept coming to me over and over and over again, I kept wondering, is this like me resisting? But I don't think it is. I think this is just me paying attention. I could be wrong. Sure. Is just build the audience up. You get the audience large enough, the money's going to come in. You don't have to worry about it. You get the audience large enough. It doesn't matter. It comes in through advertising, maybe through a speaking appearance. I mean, it just comes in various different ways. So that's the way I've always been looking at it. And I'm getting close. I mean, right now, on average, about 600 to 700 listeners per episode rather.
That's very
I figured
awesome.
my threshold's
That's
probably
good.
going to be around 1,000 where stuff starts to happen.
Wow.
And of course, because I believe
Sure.
that's probably what it'll be, you know.
Sure.
But I have visions of like mega audiences.
No, that's
and you get
awesome.
into mega audiences, you know, as you're getting into it, it just starts to, I believe
it'll
starts
come.
to come.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so I certainly would like it to come sooner rather than later, but I'm happy with it coming when it comes.
Well, there's a divine timing to it too, right? It's like sometimes it can't come sooner because if it does, maybe there's missing a key element or key individual that needs to open a door for you to get to those audience numbers or that, you know, end state that you want. Because, you know, you were talking earlier, Walt, about all the co-hosts through the years and the ones that are still with you and all that great stuff. And, you know, you think about that on our individual lives as we go through it, you know, whether it's maybe ex-girlfriends, whatever, you know, relationships, friends, whatever, romantic or not. But thinking if we wouldn't have had the relationships that we had in the past or the people that we meet or the people that we interact with and leads us down this timeline or this path to where we are currently in our life and saying, you know what, if I wouldn't have did this, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I wouldn't be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, you know, so trying to speed past, even though I think there's part of our mind that's like, let's go, let's get her done. Let's
Yeah, right. Of course.
You know, it's like, yeah, right. We want, you know, we're trying to be proactive and get ahead of the ball and movers and shakers. But, you know, that divine timing piece saying, hey, hang on, buddy. You know, if you don't have this other piece, we can jump the gun. But if we don't, then we're going to be missing some key elements that, you know, it's going to be kind of funky, you know, in the future. It's like you don't see it yet, but down the road, maybe 3 years, you'll look back and go, oh, I see that. Like if I wouldn't have met Walt, I wouldn't have done XYZ, right? Or,
sure. And that's,
you know, maybe
all the time.
For example, like the conversation, like the listener that wrote in, the conversation that we're having right in this given moment, I'm hoping, makes a profound, change or gives profound information.
Well, he just confirmed it actually. Not only did he give thanks, he said, I just had this conversation with my morning client. I mean, talk about synchronicity.
There you go.
You know?
There's validation.
Yeah.
Right there. So, you know, it's so cool. And you were talking about that you don't listen to your inner channeling, Walt. I mean,
no, it's not that I don't listen. I listen. I do pay attention. It's what I was trying to express is that I have longed to be able to converse like I converse with you, and to hear the words come back, or to in some way be able to grasp what's coming back that I can frame in a conversational format. I've never been able to pull that off. So like you guys, you can actually take information and you can turn it into words. You can express blocks of thought in words. And that's something I just feel very weak at. I'm getting it better than I used to, but it's still so scattered, you know, compared to where I want it to be. That's what I'm trying to express.
One of the things we didn't talk about when I was on that last show was my biggest belief is that we're all psychic. We're all medium. That's my belief.
And every single psychic I've ever talked to says that. Every single one.
I used
100%.
the analogy, I stole the analogy that somebody used one time talking about psychics and mediums. They used the analogy of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And they said because almost every kid, not every kid, but almost every kid has played baseball at some level, maybe in school.
Some form of it, yeah.
Right. But here's the cool thing. So think back to elementary days, first, second grade, whatever, and you're out hitting the ball, whatever, maybe a gym class. So you start there at the elementary level and you're at the entry level, but you continue on and like, where do you want to take it? Do you play until high school? Mm-hmm. Do you play through college? Do you take it to, you know, do you go on and play in the majors? Where do you go play for the Olympics? Where do you want to take it?
Right.
And that's the same thing when it talks about, you know, any ability really. You could really take it, use that analogy anywhere. but saying, what's your intent? What do you want to do with it? And, if you just want to drive it on the weekends, saying, hey, that's cool too. But, to get it stronger, to make it like the second language, it's like, okay, I need to train for the Olympics, so to speak, and I need to incorporate it into everyday life. And
but how do you train? That's the thing that blows my mind. I mean, if I were to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do some training now, what do? I have no idea what to do.
Lifting weights with psychic energy. So there's a lot of different exercises, but one of them. So if you would indulge me, I could do a quick visualization.
Yeah, sure. We got a couple minutes left.
Okay, perfect. So if everybody would, if you're listening to this or whatever, I would invite you to sit with your feet flat on the ground and close your eyes real quick and take a nice deep breath in and let it out. And just relax just for a moment. And what I want you to do is visualize in your mind that you're sitting in a busy mall. This is pre-COVID, so no masks. Okay. And so if you think of all the sights and sounds, maybe a little coffee kiosk, tons of people walking around chatting, you smell all the, maybe the food court, the Cinnabons, whatever, all the sights, smells of a busy mall. So you're really doing a lot of people watching. And you're visualizing that you're sitting in front of a department store. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be a Penny's, it can be a Macy's, doesn't matter. And I want you to visualize yourself walking into this department store. Now, as you walk in, I want you to grab a cart. And so there's different areas of the store that I want you to pay attention to. To the left are the women's. To the right is the men's. And all the way in the back of the store is the kids. And so what I want you to do, without thinking, I want you to head to that. Just allow yourself to go to a certain area of the store and start grabbing clothes off the rack. Doesn't matter if you're a man grabbing women's clothing, a woman grabbing men's, does not matter. Once you got your clothes in your cart, I want you to head to the nearest changing room. And once in there, I want you to start changing into the clothes that you have in your cart. Now, it might feel a little uncomfortable if you're changing into a different sex's clothes, but just go with me here for a minute. And as you do this, what I want you to do as you get the last garments on, I want you to take another nice deep breath in and let it out. And I want you, in your mind, to open your eyes and look in the full-length mirror. And the individual that you're seeing at first might be you in somebody else's clothes, but then I want you to see the individual that is stepping forward to communicate with you. Notice from head to foot what kind of hair, what kind of hat, if they're wearing a hat. Are they wearing earrings? Are they wearing a necklace? What about the features of their face? Is there anything specific about their throat or their chest? And continue going all the way down, whether it's a feeling, whether it's something visual that you can see. Be aware of all your senses as you connect with them. And if they start communicating with you verbally, that's fine. Listen to that. But also pay attention to all your other senses. Do you feel something with them? Do you feel the way that they passed? Do you feel or see or smell or perhaps taste something that they used to bake or sew or a hobby? Okay, what I'd like you to do is take another nice deep breath in. Okay, go ahead and open your eyes, return to the room. So one of the things, that's just a really quick visualization, and that's a technique that I call at the mall. And basically what it is that is a technique that I teach when students are having a hard time. Remember, I mentioned earlier, and early on in my development, I was like drinking from a fire hydrant and then it would dry up.
Right.
That's another way to connect to spirit and to get a visualization and also information. And then it's getting around the monkey mind, I call it, or the ego mind. And there's a lot or other real cool visualizations as well, but it's a way to start communicating. And,
get the ball
but those,
okay.
Yeah, so that's one technique, or that's one, I guess we want to call it exercise. Yeah.
Okay,
so,
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending this time. Thank you for doing this at the last minute, because you kind of stepped in graciously at the last minute. So.
Well, thanks for thinking of me, Walt, and thank you for, not only doing the show, but allowing me to jibber jab for
It's fun. It is. Isn't this like really addicting? That's the way I find it.
Well, it is, and you make it so easy. The show so easy, flows so nice. So.
Well, great. I'm glad. Well, we'll have to have you back another time. I'll kind of keep you in mind in case the co-host is sick or can't make it or something like that.
I always reach out. You never know what my schedule looks like.
Good. So thank you very much. Thank you, live streamers. Thank you especially to our podcast listeners as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everyone.